here again to read another chapter from my book, Fighting for Your Destiny. Chapter 8, Rachel. I'll begin by reading some verses from Genesis 29. Then Jacob went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and behold, a well in the field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks. And a great stone was upon the well's mouth. And thither were all the flocks gathered. And they rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the sheep, and put the stone again upon the well's mouth in his place. And Jacob said unto them, My brethren, whence be ye? And they said, Of Haran are we. And he said unto them, Know ye Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. And he said unto them, Is he well? And they said, He is well. And behold, Rachel his daughter cometh with the sheep. And he said, Lo, it is yet high day, neither is it time that the cattle should be gathered together. Water ye the sheep, and go and feed them. And they said, We cannot, until all the flocks be gathered together, until they roll the stone from the well's mouth, and we water the sheep. And while he yet spake with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near, and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel, and lifted up his voice, and wept. Already God was showing Jacob that he could rely on his promise to be with him, because he brought him, like he did with Eliezer, to the very spot where his mother's relatives lived. It's no wonder Jacob should be overcome with emotion, as he was proving for himself that the promises God made were to him personally, and they were very real. It's quite amazing that even after managing to obtain the birthright plus the blessing of the most wealthy man in his country of birth by stealth, he now found himself a pauper. Unlike Eliezer, who was sent to seek a wife for his father, Jacob was so busy trying to save his own skin by fleeing from the fury of his brother that he had not been able to prepare a dowry to take with him for his future bride. When making his commitment to God at Bethel, he spoke these words. This is from Genesis 28. And Jacob vowed a vow, saying, If God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat, and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God. He reached the house of his future in-laws with nothing. Even though his father, who inherited everything from his own father Abraham, had vast wealth, Jacob had nothing to show of his family heritage other than the fact that they were all related. He was penniless, and was even prepared to work for his uncle Laban just so he could survive. After only 1 month's trial period, Laban could see that Jacob was special and made a difference in the workplace, and that it would be to his own personal advantage to make sure Jacob remained as part of his workforce. Laban wasn't a stupid man, and could see with his own 2 eyes what was going on in the heart of Jacob concerning Rachel. Considering the character of Laban, it's a wonder his conscience would not allow Jacob to work for him for nothing. But he asked Jacob to tell him what he thought his wages should be. Jacob, who was well into his 70s and certainly not thinking of going anywhere other than where the love of his life was, said that he would work for 7 years to buy his bride. Now that's a huge price to pay. I suppose the fact that he said 7 years was like saying he was going to give his life for her. A 7 is the number representing completeness, proving the value he placed on Rachel. Chapter 29 of Genesis. And it came to pass, when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, and embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, Surely thou art my bone and my flesh. And he abode with him the space of a month. And Laban said unto Jacob, Because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me, what shall thy wages be? And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favoured. And Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter. And Laban said, It is better that I give her to thee than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days for the love he had for her. At last, the day finally dawned for Jacob to become one with his betrothed. He ran to Laban, saying, Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. Oh, yeah, he had surely been counting the days and knew exactly when to claim his well-earned wages. And true to his word, Laban set about paying what was due. What excitement and anticipation must have filled Jacob's heart that day as all the preparations were being made for the wedding feast. He'd never experienced a day like this in the whole of his life. After 7 years of exercising self-control and discipline, which the Bible says seemed to him like just a few days because of the love he had for Rachel, these hours must have been long as he exercised yet more patience, waiting to hold this precious woman in his arms. The feast went on until finally, in the evening, when it was dark, Laban presented his daughter to Jacob, fitly veiled as a bride should be, allowing the bridegroom to be the first to unveil her. They entered the dark bridal chamber. Words were not important now. They were at last able to touch, smell, taste. Jacob's eyes and gentleness had told Rachel many times in many ways how much he loved her, but now it was time to touch and become intimate. How blessed Jacob must have felt to at last be one with his love. That night's sleep must have been the most satisfying and blissful sleep he had ever experienced. Genesis 29. And Laban gave his daughter Leah Zilpah, his maid, for an handmaid. And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this you've done unto me? Did not I serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore hast thou beguiled me? Whoa, would you believe it? The tables had been turned on him, and he was now the one to experience what it was like to be tricked. What a turn of events. A word of warning for anyone reading this book. This is what Samuel the prophet says concerning how God deals with people. This is from 2 Samuel 22. With the merciful thou wilt show thyself merciful, and with the upright man thou wilt show thyself upright. With the pure thou wilt show thyself pure, and with the froward thou wilt show thyself unsavoury. Jacob was getting his just deserts. Just because God had made a covenant with him and promised that he would bless him and be with him did not mean that he was prepared to leave him as he was. When God decides to adopt us, we are taken out of the family we once belonged to, and that's Satan's, because the whole world has been sold under sin. And we now begin a new life in God's family. But then he will do what is necessary to change our unsavoury character so that it reflects him rather than Satan. The only way any one of us can prove that God is our Father is by our lifestyle. There has to be change. One of the most effective ways to change a person is to deal out the medicine they have been administering so that they know what they're putting everyone else through. Some years ago, Maurice and I lived in Holland for a period of 6 months whilst we preached and helped in a practical way a Christian organisation. Nathan, our eldest child, was 2 years old at this point in time, and as the organisation ran a creche to take care of the full-time workers' children, they asked if I would like to take Nathan along. What a blessing! Nathan was able to mix with all the other children and mingled easily, as children always seem to do, even though they spoke Dutch, and he was only hearing English from my husband Morris and myself. How shocked I was when he asked for things in this funny language. I thought he was trying to speak in baby talk, but he was now speaking Dutch to me. Things went great for a few weeks, but then I noticed some marks on his upper arm. They looked like bruises with small indentations, but couldn't recognise what they were. One sunny day, Nathan and I were outside with all the workers' children in the little playground the organisation had made in the compound, when one of the parents made mention of the marks on Nathan's upper arms. Do you know how he got that mark, Joanna? No, I've no idea. I've noticed a couple of them over the past few days. Do you see that little boy over there? She pointed to a little boy who actually belonged to the head of the organisation. He was biting Nathan on the arm. In fact, he's been making quite a habit of biting all the children in the creche. I looked at the little boy. As I did so, I saw quite a big red mark on his cheek. Yeah, Nathan got sick of him biting, so he bit back. That's what that mark is, and we're so glad because that little boy has not bitten another child since. Your little Nathan is a hero. None of the parents had made any impression complaining to the head of the organisation about his son, because all he would do was tell him off saying it was a naughty thing to do. But Nathan took action, as only a guileless child can, and dealt with the situation for good. Sometimes it's only tasting our own medicine which makes us realise the pain and torment we put other people through. Jacob had dealt treacherously with his own family. God now decided he needed to know how it felt. His pain, however, was not only experienced by himself, but Rachel also felt the devastation. She too had been waiting with longing for this day, only to find that she'd been robbed at the very last moment by her father of all people. I can't imagine the pain she felt in her heart during that first night following the marriage feast. While Jacob was experiencing perfect bliss and happiness, she must have been broken-hearted, sobbing into her pillow without any relief. Oh, the pain a human soul can experience. But nobody would have given Rachel a second thought that night as she hid in shame because, 1, Jacob had his wife. 2, Laban felt completely justified giving Jacob his eldest daughter, as that was the custom of his land. The eldest should marry first. Besides, he had a plan up his sleeve. And 3, everybody had enjoyed a good day of feasting. Yes, all was well. But that was the worst night of Rachel's whole life. You know, when we lead selfish lives, we have no idea how many other lives we ruin. A man who selfishly drinks his earnings to satisfy his desire and habit has no concern for the pain he inflicts on his family. He doesn't worry about the fact they can't afford another thing because he has spent all the money. He doesn't remember falling around, vomiting, or beating his wife and children in his drunken stupor. He has no recollection of the foolish expletives he verbalized to those in the bar where he drank, or the women he played around with. His concern was entirely to please self, and he did it at the expense of others. Drink may not be your particular problem, but when you will do anything to get what you want, then you can be sure you will be trampling over other people in the process. All our actions have consequences, and many innocent people suffer. I'm just thinking of the time Joshua had just seen a mighty victory at Jericho, when all the walls fell flat, miraculously, only to be defeated by a few men at Ai. Instead of sending his whole army to fight against the men of Ai, he sent about 3,000 men because he knew they would easily contain the situation. But in actual fact, these few men of Ai chased the 3,000 soldiers, killing 36 Israelites in the process, leaving the other 2,964 warriors trembling in fear. Joshua was baffled. Why had this happened? This is from Joshua 7. And Joshua rent his clothes and fell to the earth upon his face before the ark of the Lord until the eventide, he and the elders of Israel, and put dust upon their heads. And Joshua said, Alas, O Lord God, wherefore hast thou at all brought this people over Jordan to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us? Would to God we had been content and dwelt on the other side Jordan. O Lord, what shall I say when Israel turneth their backs before their enemies? For the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land shall hear of it, and shall environ us round, and cut off our name from the earth. And what wilt thou do unto thy great name? There was a serious problem going on here. Doesn't sound so bad that 36 men were killed in battle, but the fact is that this little group of people from Ai had filled the Israelites with fear. This was a really big deal, especially as the miracle of the Jericho walls completely collapsing had only just taken place, and everyone in the surrounding countries were living in fear of the Israelites. Joshua was shocked at this turn of events. God heard Joshua and answered immediately, because this was at the very beginning of the revival of the Israelite camp. They had been on a death march for the past 40 years, but it was now the day of the Lord, when he was going to work his wonders again amongst his people. There was a battle on. The enemy wanted to cause havoc in the camp by getting the people to sin, which would in turn stop God fulfilling his plan. God had to do something immediately, just like he did in the case of Ananias and Sapphira in Acts 5. Joshua had asked, And what will you do to your great name? Meaning, how will you get your reputation back now? And this was God's response in Joshua chapter 7. And the Lord said to Joshua, Get thee up. Wherefore liest thou upon thy face? Israel has sinned, and they've also transgressed my covenant which I commanded them, for they have even taken the accursed thing, and have also stolen and dissembled themselves, and they have put it even among their own stuff. Therefore the children of Israel could not stand before their enemies, but turned their backs before their enemies, because they were accursed. Neither will I be with you any more, except you destroy the accursed from among you. Joshua, surely you know me by now. How can I stand by and let my people revolt against me and go unpunished? Surely you don't expect me to be with you when there is rebellion going on. You ask me how I will get my reputation back? Well, I'll tell you, sift out that rebel in the camp, because I'm going to nip this thing in the bud. I need Israel to know how I deal with rebellion, so they won't follow his example. Sure enough, Achan was found to be the one guilty of disobeying God's command to not take any of the spoil from Jericho, because God had stated that it was an accursed city. All he did was see something he wanted, the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and it had caused him to covet. And Achan answered Joshua and said, Indeed, I've sinned against the Lord God of Israel, and thus have I done. When I saw among the spoils a goodly Babylonish garment, and 200 shekels of silver, and a wedge of gold of 50 shekels weight, then I coveted them, and took them, and behold, they are hid in the earth in the midst of my tent, and the silver under it. You would think that this loving God would hear this confession, forgive Achan, restore him back into the camp, and everything would go on as before, now that he'd publicly been shamed. But no, everyone and everything belonging to Achan was condemned to a brutal death because of one man's selfish action. This is what happened in Joshua 7. So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran unto the tent, and behold, it was hid in his tent, and the silver under it. And they took them out of the midst of the tent, and brought them unto Joshua, and unto all the children of Israel, and laid them out before the Lord. And Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan, the son of Zerah, and the silver, and the garment, and the wedge of gold, and his sons, and his daughters, and his oxen, and his asses, and his sheep, and his tent, and all that he had. And they brought them unto the valley of Achor. And Joshua said, Why have you troubled us? The Lord shall trouble you this day. And all Israel stoned him with stones, and burned them with fire, after they had stoned them with stones. And they raised over him a great heap of stones unto this day. So the Lord turned from the fierceness of his anger. Wherefore the name of that place was called the valley of Achor unto this day. Jacob was furious with Laban for his deceitful dealing. But Laban had already anticipated this and presented the card he had been hiding up his sleeve. Genesis 29. Fulfill her week, and we will give you also for the service which thou shalt serve me yet 7 other years. And Jacob did so, and fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel, his daughter, to wife also. Laban was one tricky character. With just one act of deceit, he had now managed to secure another 7 years of labour from Jacob. Jacob hadn't wanted 2 wives. He would never have made the initial deal to work for Leah. He had been stitched up, and the only way he could now get Rachel was to agree to Laban's proposal. So Jacob spent 14 years working for Laban to buy his brides, and was still a pauper. But now not only he, but his whole family were all in debt to Laban, for they were all relying on him for everything. Jacob had received exactly what he had asked God for: food and clothing. For Rachel, this wedding feast should have been the happiest day of her life, for she had envisaged being the wife of Jacob. But I'm absolutely certain that the week Jacob had spent being the husband of her older sister cast a very heavy shadow, bringing with it terrible rivalry between the 2 sisters who had at one time shared a very special bond. Leah had been placed in an impossible situation. What say had she in this whole affair? Women didn't have rights, and daughters had even less. Their father had manipulated both sisters to achieve his own ends, and they were just pawns on the chessboard being pushed around according to his will. The fact that Jacob loved Rachel with a love he couldn't possibly simulate with Leah didn't help at all. In fact, it made matters worse, because God could see this too. Genesis 29. And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, Surely the Lord has looked upon my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, Because the Lord hath heard that I was hated, he hath therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, Now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore was his name called Levi. And she conceived again and bare a son, and she said, Now will I praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah, and left off bearing. And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister. To compensate for the fact that she couldn't give birth, Rachel gave Jacob her handmaid Bilhah to be a surrogate mother, who presented him with 2 boys. After giving Jacob 4 sons, Leah retaliated by giving her handmaid also, thus producing another 2 sons for Jacob. How sad that Jacob and Rachel were not equally yoked. What? Where did that statement come from? Well, we see here that Rachel blamed Jacob for the fact she had not conceived. When Jacob arrived on Laban's doorstep, he made bold statements referring to the God of his fathers, and even had a personal encounter with him when he left home. But he couldn't pray with or for his wife, who did not know his God or share his beliefs. The next verse shows Jacob's response. Genesis 30. And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said unto Jacob, Give me children, or else I die. Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, Am I in God's stead, who hath withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? This response is such a contrast to that of his father Isaac, who suffered a similar situation. Genesis 25. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife, because she was barren, and the Lord was entreated of him. And Rebekah his wife conceived.